Hey everyone, I'm Scott from My Myelitis and welcome to the second video in the Scott Story playlist. In this video I'm going to be talking about my stay in hospital recovering from a rare neuro-immune condition called transverse myelitis. This will include the treatments I was given, the difficulties with the symptoms I had, and the improvements to my condition which was made whilst I was at hospital. So let's get started. So, a quick recap from last video was that I had been admitted into hospital after having weakness and pins and needles in both of my legs, being unable to go to the toilet and difficulty breathing properly due to a bruise-like feeling all the way across my upper body. I'd had an MRI scan of my lower spine and was waiting in the surgical assessment unit of the hospital for the results and a diagnosis of what was happening to me. I had to spend the night at the surgical assessment unit whilst I was waiting for the results of the MRI scan. This area is where they keep people who are waiting for either an operation or for a bed in another part of the hospital to become free. Think of it as like a holding area until other areas of the hospital become free for patients to move into. At this point my parents had gone back home and brought me some of my things to keep me occupied, so like my tablet, clothes and some items, because we were unsure about how long I was actually going to be staying in hospital for. The room which I was staying in had 5 other bed bays which were being occupied by other patients. One patient was in a significant amount of pain and I believe he was waiting for an operation on his appendix or something, and that was what was causing the pain. Because of this, he was often calling the nurses for attention and pain medication. This happened a number of times through the night and meant that I didn't get much sleep, as every single time the nurses came into the area they were waking everyone up and being quite noisy. Thankfully he was called for his operation at around 5 AM and taken into another area which was more appropriate. A few hours later I was sent for a second MRI scan, but this time they were going to be scanning my entire spine and brain, so the scan took a lot longer. Due to my lack of sleep from the previous night, I actually fell asleep a few times during the scan, which did surprise me considering how loud an MRI scanner is when it's being used. Once that was finished, I was taken from the MRI scanner back to the surgical assessment unit to wait for the results. At around 2 PM I got a call on my phone from a withheld number, so I ignored it. A few moments later a nurse came to me and asked if the mobile number, which I'd given them when I was admitted into hospital, was correct, as a consultant was trying to contact me. My phone rang again and it was a consultant who had the results of both of the MRI scans. The consultant gave me a diagnosis of transverse myelitis, which means inflammation of the spinal cord. She explained that I had inflammatory lesions in my spine, which I would later find out were in segments T2 to T7 and T8 to T11, and I also had some small lesions in my brain. I needed to be moved to a neurology ward later that day and treated with corticosteroids immediately to reduce the inflammation. At around 8 PM I was moved from the surgical assessment unit by patient ambulance to another hospital within the city. At this point my legs had become even weaker and I could not walk or stand, and so I had to be put in a wheelchair in order to be moved to the next hospital. This was kind of crazy. Had I gone from being perfectly fine 5 days ago to now being unable to walk and feeling very tired and sapped of energy. When I arrived at the next hospital I was transferred straight to the neurology ward and given a bed. This time there was only 3 other beds in the bed bay I was staying in, which was a bit better as I now had a bedside chair, table and a lot more space. The bed bay also had its own bathroom, but sadly the shower in it wasn't working. After going to sleep that night I was awoken again at 5 AM on the Saturday morning by a neurologist who inserted a cannula, which is an IV for the American viewers watching, into my arm ready for treatment. Later that morning I was given 1000 millilitres of methylprednisolone through the cannula, which would be the first of 5 doses, which were all going to be administered to me in the morning for the next 4 days. After these IV treatments were completed, my cannula was removed and I was moved on to oral prednisolone, which I took every morning with food at a dose of 50 milligrams, and that was continued throughout the time I was in hospital. Alongside the oral steroids I also took lansoprazole, which reduces stomach acid, as prednisolone can cause stomach issues such as acid reflux, heartburn and gastritis. On Sunday the 8th of March, a neurologist came to speak to me about having a lumbar puncture or spinal tap, and this is when a long needle is inserted between the bones of the spine to collect cerebrospinal fluid. the neurologist wanted to run tests on the fluid to see whether the AQP4 or MOGAD antibody was present in the spinal fluid, and that's what might have been causing the transverse myelitis and all the symptoms that came with it. After signing a consent form, a different neurologist came to perform the lumbar puncture later that day. During the process, I had to lay on my side and bring my knees up to my chest, so I was curled up in a ball, and this is so that the spinal fluid could be accessed easier by the needle. When you're in this position, the bones of your spine actually open, which can allow the needle to enter and gain access to the fluid. Although it should have been easier, the neurologist actually missed 6 times, and another neurologist who was more experienced had to then come and do it. According to the apprentice nurse who was helping with the procedure, the second neurologist had to use the same insertion point as the first neurologist to finally get the sample of fluid that was needed to be tested. Before and after the procedure, people actually told me that a lumbar puncture is apparently really painful. Now, maybe I got lucky due to the area where the needle was inserted. This was actually the same area that was numb when I first got the symptoms of transverse myelitis, and so I didn't actually feel the needle being inserted at all. Whilst I didn't have any pain, my legs did shake and spasm every single time the needle was inserted, so I had to hold them really tight to stop them from moving. After the spinal tap had been completed, I was told to drink plenty of water and lie down flat on my back for at least an hour to prevent headaches. Whilst I was in hospital, I also required physiotherapy due to the weakening and loss of sensation in my legs, and this was also affecting my balance. Neurological tests were also conducted by the consultants regularly, and with the help of the steroids and physiotherapy, I started to regain my strength and balance. The physiotherapy sessions started with me standing upright by myself, with my eyes open, and then with my eyes closed, and then also while standing on different objects, such as a pillow or a towel. As I improved, they also started to slightly nudge or push me whilst I was standing to see if I could keep my balance. It wasn't long until I could start to walk short distances unaided, such as to the toilet or shower on the ward, or transfer myself from the bed to the bedside chair, and also begin to do some bodyweight exercises and stretches to improve my strength even further. The final physiotherapy sessions involved me walking up and down a flight of stairs unaided. I was able to manage this, but I did have to stop with both feet at each step, as my left leg was still not as strong as my right one, which was causing balancing issues when using the stairs. Whilst this was still an issue when I was discharged, I was really happy with the progress I made with the physiotherapy whilst I was in hospital. One area which I was having big problems with whilst I was at the hospital was my bladder. I had a catheter inserted in the surgical assessment unit, which allowed urine to drain into a urine bag when needed, but carrying this around would make walking and balancing even more difficult. During my stay, I had 2 attempts at removing the catheter to see whether my body was able to release urine by itself, and sadly both were unsuccessful. This is known as a TWOC, or which stands for trial without catheter. The second attempt was really frustrating for me, as I prepared the best I could by drinking lots of fluids. The feeling to urinate had returned, but I was just unable to release anything. I ended up having to be discharged from the hospital with the catheter still in, but the urine bag was replaced by one which could be strapped to my leg, which did help with my mobility. On Wednesday the 18th of March 2020, I was discharged from hospital after just under 2 weeks of recovery. March was when the pandemic was starting to pick up in the UK, and so I think they needed to free up as many beds as possible, but I was more than happy to be going home. During my stay, I had friends, family, work colleagues all visit me, which helped to pass the time. Recovery from transverse myelitis often takes a lot longer than how long it takes for the symptoms to appear, and it helped that I had people visiting me to stop me from being too impatient with the recovery. My balance had really improved, and although navigating stairs was still an issue, my mobility had improved to the point which I was able to walk independently. Okay, I'm going to leave the story here for this video, as I expect it to run on for some time now. I'm trying to keep the videos to around 10 minutes long, so sometimes it may feel that I'm quickly going over through lots of things that happened in my story. If you want to read my story in more detail, I'll leave a link to the Scott's Story page on the My Myelitis website in the description below. So, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the My Myelitis YouTube channel for further episodes of Scott's Story and information on rare neurological conditions. Thanks again, and I'll see you in episode number 3.